Welcome everyone to my presentation on the Hebrew Bible tagged, also known as HMTW4. We're recording this webinar, so if you have to leave or if you want to watch over any part of it again afterwards, we'll make that recording available to everyone who attends, and I think we'll also put it on our YouTube channel at some point. My name is André-Philippe Terrien. I've been working for Accordance since 2022, and before that, for years before that, I was an Accordance user. And this module definitely helped me learn Biblical Hebrew a lot. So before I talk about different searches that you can do with this module, I wanted to talk a little bit about its history and background. So I recently updated it and renamed its library name to Hebrew Bible Leningrad Codex, as you see here. The current version of the module is version 3.4, which you can see at the bottom of this info window, which you can access as I just did if you right-click anywhere in the module and go to About This Text, or from the library pane. If you find the module, it's this little eye icon next to the module. I'm not actually certain that when I updated it on the user's end, it's changed the library name. It may not have changed the library name. The old library name is Hebrew Bible, and then in parentheses, Biblia Hebraica, and then tagged. And the reason I changed that name was to make it clear that this is not intended to be a representation or an electronic edition of BHS, Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia, but that it's really intended to be an electronic edition of the Leningrad Codex itself. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Leningrad Codex. Oh, and before I forget, because I probably will, if this module, HMTW4, is its module name, you can search for the module name of any module in the library. So sometimes I'll refer to this as HMTW4 because it's shorter than saying Hebrew Bible tagged. There is an accompanying notes module that should appear in the apparatus section of your library. If you do not have that module available to you, it's probably because you purchased this module before, I don't know, the year 2021 or something like that. My predecessor at Accordance, Jordan Stevens, prepared this module, and I added more things to it. So if you don't have this module installed, you should be able to get it for free by just deleting your Hebrew Bible this module HMTW4 from your library, and make sure when you delete that you say move to trash, and then you want to quit the app, restart, and install it again through easy install, and this module HMTW4 notes should appear. And if I get a chance to, I'll talk about that module real quick. I'm going to try to talk for the whole hour and then see if there are any questions. So be typing your questions in the question box, and I'll look for those at the end. If there's anything you want me to go over again or anything that I went over too quickly or forgot, hopefully you can remind me, although you won't know what I want to say. So, okay, so let's get into it. So the Hebrew Bible tagged is based on the Leningrad Codex. You can purchase as an Accordance module the Leningrad Codex images, which are pictures of all of the pages of the Leningrad Codex, which, with a few exceptions, it covers the entire Bible and has some of the back matter, but I don't think the entire colophon is there. I'm not sure about that. So it might not have all the images of the Codex, of all the pages of the Codex, but it is this Codex, and it has all the pages that cover the Hebrew Bible. So this manuscript was written around the year 1008 or 9 in Cairo, Egypt, by a scribe of the name Samuel ben Jacob, or in Hebrew, Shemuel ben Yaakov. It was prepared for Joseph ibn Yazdad, a wealthy Karaite merchant, and it was acquired, and we don't really know much of its history after that until the 19th century, when it was acquired by another Karaite gentleman by the name of Abraham Furkovich, who lived in Crimea, which was part of the Russian Empire at the time, and I think it's still part of Russia today. And so he acquired this codex, we don't know where, around the year 1840, and sold it to what is today the National Library of Russia in St. Petersburg in the 1860s. And so because this module was housed in St. Petersburg, which was renamed Leningrad during the years of the Soviet Union, which was most of the 20th century, that's why this codex is known as the Leningrad Codex, even though it doesn't really have anything to do with that place. Yeah, so it's still housed there today. It's an excellent representative of the Masoretic text, but it's not necessarily an ideal representative of the Masoretic tradition. It's not a perfect Masoretic manuscript. And one of the reasons for that, why I am saying that, is because it was only written by one scribe, whereas, oh, I didn't save it as a tab, whereas the Aleppo Codex, which is considered the best manuscript, the model or exemplar manuscript of the Hebrew Masoretic text, that manuscript was written by two different scribes, one by the name of Shlomo ben Buya'a, who wrote the consonantal text only, and then the famous Masorete Aharon ben Asher provided the vowel markings and the cantillation marks, and the Masorah Ketana and Masorah Gedola, which are around the text, which are part of the Masoretic tradition. So the reason that's an important distinction just to bear in mind is that these codices, these manuscripts in the Masoretic tradition that date to the 800s and 900s of the Common Era, they are combining two separate but inseparable traditions. On the one hand, you have the consonantal text, which is sacred and must be written down exactly the same way from manuscript to manuscript, and that's what's read in the synagogue. When you go up to read the Hebrew Bible, you open a Torah scroll or a scroll of one of the prophets, and you're going to see a text that has no vowels and no cantillation marks, only consonants. And you're supposed to train ahead of time to be able to read the text, to be able to provide the consonants and the canting from memory. So you have the textual tradition of the consonants only, and then you have the tradition of the vocalization of the text, the pronunciation of the text, which is what a Masorete memorized, knew by heart. The Hebrew term, not the biblical Hebrew term, the Hebrew term for a Masorete was a Baal HaMasorah, so a master of the tradition is a way to translate that. So he knew not only all of the vocalization and cantillation by heart, but he also knew all of this, to us, seemingly random data that is attached to the text on the sides of it in the Tumasarot that are there to preserve the integrity of the text, that are there to ensure that it doesn't get changed as it's copied. So the scribe who wrote this manuscript, Shemuel ben Yaakov, he was not a trained Masorete, although he was a very skilled scribe, no doubt. And so the Masorah Gedola and Ketana contain errors, inconsistencies in it that don't match up with the actual data in the manuscript, with the actual text. But when it comes to the text itself, it's a very excellent representative of the Masoretic text. It doesn't have very many errors, especially in the consonantal text. And yeah, that's the reason it's the gold standard. It's because it's the best that we have. It's the closest we have to a complete, but it is a complete manuscript of the Hebrew Bible in the Masoretic tradition, even though it's not, it's not written by a Masorete. So yeah, if you want to learn more about the sort of textual quality of the Leningrad Codex, I recommend reading this section of the Introduction to BHQ. And there's sources if you want to read more from other scholars on the topic. And then I highly recommend this book, The Tiberian Pronunciation Tradition of Biblical Hebrew. Especially the first chapter, which is a long introductory chapter explaining the history of the Masoretic, the Tiberian pronunciation tradition. Yeah, and in case anyone is unaware, it's the Tiberian Masoretic tradition because it centers around the city of Tiberias. We don't always use the word Tiberian, the adjective Tiberian in front of it, but the Masoretic text comes from that area, from that time period, the 800s and 900s of the Common Era. Yeah, this is a very great introduction to the history of and the evidence, the data that we have that points to the integrity of the pronunciation tradition that the Masoretes preserved for future generations so that we could have a reliable Hebrew text that we could read and understand. Okay, so I wanted quickly to talk about differences between BHS, BHQ, and HMTW4. We have a couple of modules that are sold as BHS, but they're electronic versions of the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia that have morphological tagging. And they don't have all of the features of the print BHS. So, yeah. So BHS was published in 1977. It was completely published, and so it's the most widely available printed Hebrew Bible edition today outside of Israel. It's supposed to be an exact edition of the Leningrad Codex, but there's a number of ways in which it's not. The most important way is that it doesn't attempt to, or the most evident way, I should say, is that it doesn't attempt to reproduce the Mezora Gedolah that are above and below the columns. Instead, what the editor of BHS, I believe his name was Gerard Weil, W-E-I-L, what he chose to do, hopefully I'm not mistaken in saying that, what he chose to do was to have a number at the bottom of the pages that referred to list numbers that are in a separate volume that you had to purchase. And I believe that volume today is out of print. So if you wanted to get access to a print version, a printed edition of the Hebrew Bible that gives you the Mezora Ketana and Gedolah together, you wouldn't have that in BHS. And the other reason is Gerard Weil corrected a lot of the errors in the Mezora Ketana. Yeah. Whereas BHQ took a different approach. BHQ decided to, as faithfully as possible, represent the text of Mezora Ketana and Mezora Gedolah for each verse. So yeah, so if you want access to that, it's not complete, as you probably know. We do sell the 9 current fascicles of BHQ, and they're trying to be more faithful to the Leningrad Codex. And also, they will note in the commentary that accompanies the Mezora Parva and Mezora Magna modules, they'll note where the Masochot are in error. So yeah, so BHQ and BHS try to integrate the Masorot a little bit, BHS tries to integrate it a little bit. BHQ does a better job at it. But HMTW4 really doesn't do that at all, except in the case of the Ketiv Kare, which I'm not going to have the time to talk about those, but if someone wants to ask a question at the end, I could talk about it a little bit. Instead, the new thing that HMTW4 adds to the editions of the Leningrad Codex is that it provides morphological tagging for every word in the Hebrew Bible as it appears in the Leningrad Codex. So, so that's a huge advance. So I'm going to move to talking about that now. So if you look at the information about this module, it'll say that it is based on the Groves-Wheeler Westminster Hebrew Morphology version 4.22. This was released in the year 2020. And hopefully 4.24 will be released soon, but we don't have any definite date on that. And it's published by the J. Allen Groves Center for Advanced Biblical Research, but they like to call it the Groves Center for short. The J. Allen Groves Center was originally founded as the Westminster Hebrew Institute in the 1980s, and they are the owner and maintainer of a database called the Westminster Hebrew Morphology, and that's what's the basis for our HMTW4 module. The initial data for the database came from the Masoretic text of the Hebrew Old Testament at the University of Michigan, which is also known by the name of the encoding that they came up with to represent the Hebrew, which is called the Michigan Claremont encoding. That encoding is a transliteration of BHS into a very limited set of characters, even more limited than just ASCII, because in the early 1980s they were trying to be as what's the word? They wanted their database to be usable by as many machines, readable by as many machines as possible. So that's the data that was the initial data for the Westminster Hebrew Morphology. And what J. Allen Groves, after whom the center is now named, did, he added the lexical form and the morphological parsing to every word in this database. And that the first edition, the first release of WHM, of what the Westminster Hebrew Morphology, was in 1991, and I'm told that it was originally distributed on floppy disk. So times have changed. Yeah, so J. Allen Groves was a professor at Westminster Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania on the East Coast. So that's why Westminster is more than once in the name of this module's history. Okay, so that's about the Grove Center. How are we doing for time? Next, I wanted to quickly talk about changes that I've made to the module. Oh, before I do that, I also want to recommend the first and second chapter of Bruce Waltke, and I don't remember his first name, Bruce Waltke, and M. O'Connor's Introduction to Biblical Hebrew Syntax. The first and second chapters give an introduction to sort of the history of the Masoretic text, of the Hebrew Bible before that, and also they give a history of the study of Hebrew grammar, which really began in the in the 10th century and flourished on into the Middle Ages. And in the period of the Tiberian Masoretes, the study of Hebrew grammar wasn't that widespread, or it was more about, people were more concerned about just transmitting the text as exactly as possible as they received it. That was the Masoretes' job, not grammatical description. So so WHM is definitely adding to our knowledge base and to our ability to know the Hebrew Bible, to understand it by providing that morphological tagging. Okay, so changes that I've made to this module, I believe that's here. Okay. There's like too many to describe. Basically what I did is I tried to make sure that vowel markings did not clash with other vowel markings, and that cantillation marks did not clash with vowels. I just did my best to make sure that those no longer occurred. And just side by side here, you can compare an older module that I have not had the chance to update yet, Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia tagged, which has the critical apparatus, the superscript numbers, that letters that refer to the critical apparatus of BHS. If you look at the first word here, vayach, in Genesis chapter 1 verse 4, the two patachs that are underneath the first two letters are touching, and the darga that's underneath the yod is very close to the shava that's underneath the resh. And it looks a little bit confusing, especially if you're a newer student of biblical Hebrew. So I wanted our module to be a lot more usable in a classroom situation, or by new readers of the Hebrew Bible who might not have lots of experience reading a printed Hebrew Bible where these things are usually correct. So what I've done is I've separated the patachs a little bit and the shava a little bit. And this isn't something I did by hand. I wrote lots of scripts that try to identify as many situations of clashes as possible, and write fixes for them. So another common one, this one's a little bit more egregious. If you look at the BHST on the right side here, it really looks like you should vocalize this word as vayida, but really it's well, I didn't do the accent right, vayida, but really it's vayeda. So this is a tsere here, and the rightmost dot of the tsere is touching the line of the patach, so you can't distinguish them, and especially if you're a newer student of biblical Hebrew, this is not an ideal situation. And because of this, when I had taught biblical Hebrew in the past, I would always copy and paste this text into a word processor and use a different font. So I wasn't actually using accordance, even though I wanted to display the Hebrew Bible during our live meetings when I was teaching Hebrew. So I fixed this. in, I don't know, hundreds of places, perhaps thousands, I don't know. Another change that I made is that every instance of furtive patach is indicated by the patach being a little bit to the right of its normal position. So you can compare with BHST on the right here. Another change is that I fixed the Kativ Kares here in Job 38:1 and Isaiah 9:6. In version 2.2 of this module, the Hebrew Bible tagged, these were not displaying correctly as intended. And another, these are really difficult. On the Vav here at the beginning of Psalm, the 9th Psalm, verse 8, there's a patach, there's a metag, and there is a dechi, all on the first letter. And it's, as you can imagine, it's difficult to fit these three symbols on underneath one narrow Hebrew consonant. And so you can look at BHST how it doesn't really appear ideally there. The different symbols are not distinguishable. The dechi is touching the patach. So that's something I fixed as much as possible. So if you notice other places where vowels and cantillation marks are touching that shouldn't, you can report that as a correction, and I'll take a look at it at some point. Okay, other changes that I've made is that the gentilic tag, which is used for nouns in Aramaic, was not displaying correctly. So currently it's displaying correctly. If you look at this instance at the bottom here, it says noun gentilic plural determined, and that's a correct parsing of this verb, this noun, I mean, castailler. Okay, let's get into a little bit of the data structure before I look at how to search this module. So for each word or part of a word, like in this case, vatomer is two separate forms. You have the conjunction vav, which is always attached to the word that follows it, and then you have the verb itself, tomer. For each word or part of a word, the WHM provides the inflected form, which is the form which is how we describe the word as it occurs in the Leningrad Codex. And then it provides the lexical form, which is, if we look at the instant details here at the bottom, which is the form of the word as it appears in Halot, the excellent lexicon. And then after that, after the lexical form for each word, there is also the part of speech. In this case, it's always going to be in bold in the instant details. So in this case, verb is in bold. This is a verb. And then depending on the part of speech, you're going to have some grammatical parsing. So that's all data that's behind this module that's provided to us by the Westminster Hebrew Morphology. Accordance adds two more sort of databases to that that are associated with the lexical form, and you can see them here. So Amar -1 is the lexical form. Amar in parentheses is the root, and so this is something that Helen Brown added for each lexeme in the Hebrew Bible, a root that's associated. Now the root search, if you search for roots, it's not as precise as searching for lexemes. And also there are roots, like for example, let me just quickly show you. If I search for, to search for roots, you want to enter the plus symbol first. So let's search for Aleph Shin Resh, and let's look at the analytics to see what lexemes occur. This is only showing the lexemes. Some of these lexemes are arguably unrelated. An expert in Semitic languages would tell you Ashur, this is Assyria, but you know, Asher is the name of the tribe and of the son of Jacob. These are probably not related. Perhaps they are, I don't know, but they're probably not. So the root search is a little bit less precise, but it can be helpful if you're trying to find, you know, all nouns or adjectives that are related to a verb. That's sort of the purpose of the root search. And then another final piece of information that we've added, that we provide to add to this database, is an English gloss for every lexeme. So in this case, I had my cursor on vayaras, and so the verb is asa, ein sin hey, and then at the end of the description here in the instant details, it shows to do or make. So if you find any mistakes in the glosses, that's something to report to us as well. These glosses are not provided by the Groves Center, they're provided by us. And I know there are mistakes in here. I've corrected a few. Okay, and the glosses are not searchable, by the way, like the roots are. So that's the data structure. Now I want to point something out, which you may not be aware of. Quickly, I'm just going to go to the settings and go to compare text. Okay, yeah, and then go to instant details. I'm going to turn on key information and hit OK. All right, now it's displaying something new that wasn't there before as a second paragraph in the instant details associated with this lexical form ein, seen, hey. It's displaying, and it tells you which module it's grabbing it from. It's grabbing it from the NIV 2011 with enhanced GK numbers. It's saying this corresponds to the GK key number H 6913, and the translation in the NIV for this one word is made. So I want you to bear this in mind, that the linking between how it works in accordance is that for each tagged Bible that has key numbers that tagged to each word or to most of the words, there's a database behind it that associates each keyword with Hebrew or Greek, as the case may be, lexeme. And so that's separate from this module entirely. And to change which of the keyed Bibles is displaying at the bottom of in the instant details, you want to go to compare text in your settings, and you want to change keyed text. So right now I'm going to change it to NASB 2020. And another thing to bear in mind, I think the default setting for everyone for in accordance is ESV. The ESV is not completely tagged when it comes to Strong's numbers. I've seen places where there's mistakes or missing tagging. Yeah. Another thing to bear in mind real quick is that the NIV and then the three Lockman Foundation Bibles, the LSB, the NASB 2020, and the NASB 1995, they are the only Bibles that I'm aware of that provide the Strong's tagging themselves. The other Bibles that we have that have Strong's tagging, someone else than the publisher did that Strong's tagging. So if it's incorrect or imprecise, that's why. And you can report a correction for the Strong's tagging in that module. Don't write an email saying that this Hebrew word is showing the wrong gloss in English if you're looking at the ESV's gloss, for example. Okay, so now that we've talked about the data a little bit, I want to, how are we doing for time? Yeah, I think I'm gonna skip this. We're gonna start looking at different ways that you can search this module. And I'm gonna turn my camera off since we're gonna be looking at the screen more. Okay, so the first thing, the most basic search that you could do is that you can use the dot symbol to search for any symbol in the text. In this case, I did something a little interesting. Oh, before that, actually, one last thing before that. If I go, wrong one. This is just called workspace. If you go to the accordance help files, which are accessible from the help menu and accordance help, and you search for Yehudit, you should find this page called entering Hebrew characters. And if you open a keyboard map for Yehudit font, you should have this nice little image that shows you all of the Hebrew characters that will be entered for each character on your English US keyboard that you enter. I recommend using this over using the Israeli keyboard on your computer, but if you're more used to using the Israeli keyboard, then of course you should do that. Okay, so back to here. So yeah, so the dot symbol lets you search for any character. In this case, I typed capital C, which is an unpointed scene, and we found all the instances in the HMTW4 where there is a scene without a dot. And most of these are the word yisochor, which is a perpetual perpetual cative carré. So it's not actually indicated as a cative carré, but one of these is actually an error in the Leningrad Codex, Deuteronomy 24:16. There's no sheen dot here as there should be. But do notice that in the instant details, let me make these a little bigger. Hopefully they weren't too small earlier. In the instant details, ish has, the lexical form has the sheen dot there. So it's correctly identified as to what this lexeme is, but if you did an exact inflected search for ish, you would not find this instance because it's actually ish without a sheen dot. And then here, another error in the Leningrad Codex. The scribe didn't have enough coffee that morning, so he forgot the seen dot on seva. I don't know what's showing. Okay, yeah, gray hair. Okay, and you can also search for vowels or the dagesh. And in this case, I searched for the dagesh because I wanted to show you that in our Yehudit font, as well as in the WHM database, there's no differentiation between a mapik and a shurek dot and a dagesh. If you look at the very first letter here, ba in Bereshit has a dagesh lene. The sheen in Hashomayim has a dagesh forte. The two are not distinguished. It's the same symbol as far as the computer is concerned. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, on the word tohu in the shurek, that dot is a shurek dot. It's not a dagesh, but it's showing up if you search for a dagesh. And then I think later in this chapter, if I scroll down, the animals according to their kind, leminach, where is that? Here in Genesis chapter 1, verse 25, laminoh is, this is a mapik. This is neither a dagesh nor a shurek dot, but it also shows up as a search. So that's just something to bear in mind, that when you're looking for the vowels or cantillation marks, some of them may technically have different names in different situations, but our software doesn't really differentiate between those. Okay, let's look at the last example of a dot search. This one is searching for every instance of a pashta in the Hebrew Bible. And I want to point out something really quickly. In order to, okay, here, so I'm going to try throughout to give some tips for entering search terms, making that easier for you. First of all, to select the entire contents of your search box, you can just hit the tab button. So with this selected, I can just hit the backspace button on my keyboard, or I can go to one of the menus and find something that I want to insert using, I'll go to the search menu and find something that I want to insert. So in this case, I'm going to type the period symbol again. And if you don't know how to enter any particular character in our Yehudit font, I know that that keyboard map that I showed you doesn't actually tell you how to enter all of the cantillation marks. You want to go to the window menu and you want to go to the characters palette. And that's what is showing here. And so here, if we hover over each character, at the bottom you see its name, which may be imprecise, right? Like I said about the dagesh, this is also technically mapik and shurek are all dagesh. So you have the name, and then you also have the keyboard, the key combinations to enter this yourself if you want to remember that in the future. Now, I just want to point out that pashta and first pashta are a little confusing, a little bit of a misnomer. First pashta is used as a first pashta in the sense that if there are two pashtas on one word, first pashta will only be used as the first one. But if you do this search, you're not going to find all the instances of first pashta, because this character is actually designed to be a little bit further back so that it doesn't cover the cholim character, or doesn't clash with the lamed, or doesn't clash with the seen dot. So if I return to our original search of just pashta, we're going to find right here mayim. This result didn't show up earlier, but this is truly a first pashta. But because the computer doesn't care or doesn't know the difference, this is showing up only if you search pashta, not first pashta. So that's something to bear in mind, especially with the cantillation marks, especially with like siluk and meteg and right meteg. Those are all a little bit mixed together. You have to know the difference. Okay. So that's the dot search. Let's look at searching simple, what I'm going to call simple searches, which is searching for only one term at a time. We're going to begin with an unpointed search for a lexeme because this is a little bit interesting. So if you're doing an if you don't use the equal symbol, which says I want exactly this lexeme or exactly this inflected form, if you don't use the equal symbol, Accordance will allow you to enter the dotless scene. So let's look at the analytics here. We find the verbs lisboa, to be satisfied, and we find the verb lishboa, I guess, to swear an oath, that occurs in the nifal and the hifil side. Yeah, so, and we find, the number 7. So this is a scene, right? And this is a sheen over here. So it found both. Let me scroll further down here to the first instance of, this is the adjective solvere, but it's finding this alongside, the word for 70, shivrim, and the verb for swearing an oath, vayishovar. So, so now the next search is that I used a scene dot instead, and now we're only finding the words that have a scene, not a sheen, in this spelling. And the last one I did was with a sheen dot. Now, if we go back to the analytics here, so now we're going to talk about the exact search. So to do an exact search for a lexeme, you enter the equal symbol, and if I just do it like this and I hit enter, Accordance is going to say, hey, you need to choose a real word that exists in my list of lexemes. And that's because, of course, there's no lexeme that has a dotless scene or dotless sheen. So I got to provide one. So let's type the equal symbol in front of here. And actually, let's open our analytics real quickly to see what's going to happen. Currently, we have 4 different words showing up. The verb, the noun meaning abundance, the adjective meaning to be satisfied or full, and a noun meaning, and this gloss is incorrect here, meaning like satisfaction or I don't know, the satiety, I guess. So if I hit enter, now we're only going to have one word show up, and that's the verb specifically. So in Halot, verbs are always spelled without vowels in the entry at the beginning of the entry. The head word is always spelled without vowels, and that's how the lexical forms are given by the Growth Center, by the WHM database. So that's what we follow here. And then we do the same thing with sheen, and now we're going to find, let me open the analytics again for this one. We're going to find only the verb, the meaning to swear. Now we're going to look at inflected searches. So to do an inflected search, you want to use the double quotes or single quotes around your search term. I'm going to hit enter, and now if we look at pull up the analytics for this, I'm going to add to our analytics. By the way, you can add more information or change the information that's displaying in your analytics by going to the gear icon. By the way, I'm sorry, before that, I'm always selecting word count totals and analysis. That's the most useful one I find to examine the data of the HMT-W4, but you might find the other forms of analysis useful as well. So so I'm going to the gear icon, I'm opening customize display, and then it says lexeme. I also want to know, hey, what's the inflected form for each lexeme that's been found? And if we look at the inflected forms, all we find are forms that have only the letters shin, bet, and ayin, or actually sin as well, because we used the dotless s. If I say I want to reproduce, say I want to reproduce one of these forms exactly, you can double click in the analytics and it'll search exactly for this term. And we'll talk about the @ symbol in a few minutes. Okay, so yeah, so that's the inflected search. Now, if I try to add vowels to this, and let's just say va, because we had seen that one, and I add an equal symbol in front of it to say I want exactly the spelling. I want the vowels to be included in the search. Now we're going to have an error because we didn't specify seen or sheen. So let's do that. Let's say we want the seen and kamates. And so now we found only 2 results that match this spelling exactly. Yeah, so all that to say, the inflected search is less useful when you're doing an exact inflected search, I think, because you have to know sort of the exact spelling. And when you're looking at a form like this one that has a suffix on it, you're not gonna, the exact spelling might not come to mind if you're trying to find this. I do, yeah, this reminds me, I do want to point out that, again, as oh no, I haven't said this yet. I'm sorry, I've rehearsed this too many times. You can search for, you can use the question mark sign to stand in for any symbol. We could just change our previous search to only question mark bet ayin, and it's going to find other words that end in bet ayin. I'm going to remove the inflected form here. Other lexical forms that end bet ayin. Okay, so next I want to talk about searching for tags. The easiest way to search for a tag is always going to be from the search menu. You go to enter tag, and then you choose the part of speech that you're looking for. That's because you're probably not going to be familiar from the start with all of the terms and how they can be entered. So I really recommend using this menu, especially the tag menu, to be searching for tags. So in this case, I searched for the stem hofal. So it gave me all the instances. Oops, I don't want this doubled. It gave me all the instances of, oh, let's try that again. Okay. Also, another friend of yours, if you're trying to type into the Hebrew search box, is Command Z. It's easy to type something and accidentally mess up what's being entered here. If you do Command Z, it'll go back to the way it was before. And as I said earlier, you can also use the tab button to select the entire box to restart. But here I'm just going to search for this. So we have 390 instances only of this stem. It's the rarest of the major stems. But let's make our search a little bit more precise. Again, we're going to go to the tag, to enter the enter tag submenu of the search menu. We're going to select verb for the part of speech. We're going to select hofal, and I want to find, let's find all instances of the hofal that are in a vav consecutive. So only 31 of those, as here, vayugad, that's the hofal in a vav consecutive form. And then if we want to limit it even more, we can add another criteria. So hofal, vav consecutive, and let's say we want it to be in the second person. Let's see if there's any of those. There's only one in the entire Hebrew Bible, and it's vatushlachi, and you were thrown, facing the countryside. Yeah, in Ezekiel 16:5, describing, I believe, Israel or Judah as a newborn babe that God is rescuing from her condition. So it's actually feminine singular. I want to point out also that the exact spelling of the tags, once you start getting more familiar with them, you don't have to spell out the tag fully. You can just spell, in this case, I just spelled infinitive A for infinitive absolute, and it gave me all the instances of the nifal infinitive absolute. But if I had just typed infinitive, Accordance would have told me there are not enough characters in the entry to know which tag is meant. So that can speed up entering tags if you're typing them out, to know that you don't have to type out the whole tag. this example I chose because there are actually, if I display the, let's just display the inflected forms here. We don't care too much about exactly which lexeme it is. There are actually two different paradigms for spelling, or yeah, for forming the nifal infinitive absolute. One paradigm is to have a hey in front of it, and then another paradigm is to use the nun instead. So you can find all of those, like here in Genesis 17:13, himol, that's an infinitive absolute, and then here where there is no, well, actually maybe, yeah, where there's no, the nun is not used, and then in here, nichsof in Genesis 31:30, the nun is used, but there's no hey. So even though these are two different forms, if you're trying to search for these as an inflected search, you'd have to, make your search more complicated or make more than one search to find all of these instances. So the grammatical tagging is really powerful because all of that work's been done for you, of matching, the parsing to each word. This search, I want to point out that if you if you're doing an exact search and you're not using the quick entry or the enter lexeme or enter lexical forms or enter inflected forms boxes, you may incorrectly type a word. This word should be found, right? It's the ordinal sixth. It means sixth. If I type enter here, however, it's going to tell me, hey, you didn't type this correctly. And the reason I didn't type it correctly is because for each letter in the Hebrew, in our Yehudit font, there's a canonical order that we follow. So first you have the consonant, then you have the vowel, and so first you have the consonant, then you have the dagesh, and then you have the vowel. So if you type the vowel before the dagesh, as I did in this case, which you can't really tell if you're just looking at the search visually, then it's going to tell you that that word is not found, even though it is found if I spell it correctly. Yeah, if this brings to mind another setting I want to let you know about. If you go to the appearance section of the settings, you can disable quick entry. This is especially useful if you're trying to type inflected forms, or if you're searching for terms yourself a lot, and you don't want Accordance to be forcing you to select from a list of existing words. For example, if I just type shin shin yod and I hit enter, okay, in this case it worked. But sometimes it'll select the first term that's not what you were trying to type, and it'll enter that instead. So disabling the quick entry can be helpful. Okay, so the letters search, now here we're going to look on the right here, we have different search options. You have the verse search, the word search, which is what we've been working with so far, and the letter search. The word search really cares about the separation between different morphemes or different forms in a single word. So if I try to search for velo yavinu here with a word search, Accordance is going to say, hey, this is not a search you can make. Would you like to search for a letter search instead? Now, just to show you how this would work, because we're going to talk about searching for more than one term in a second, you want to add a space between each separate morpheme if you're doing a word search. Oh, it should have, well, oh yeah, I need to make sure this is inflected. And now it's going to find these. But this was a lot more complicated than if I just typed out the word as I wanted to, which is Vav Lamed Aleph Yod Bet Yod Nun Vav. And now I found exactly what I wanted. So the letters search is for searching graphical words. It doesn't incorporate any of the morphological tagging. It sort of ignores that and gives you the ability to find words as they are spelled visually in the Leningrad Codex. So that's especially useful if you want to, if you're researching or looking at the Masorah, the Masorot, and you want to find, and that's what I was doing in this case, in Psalms 82:5 in the Leningrad Codex. There's a note there. Let me open it in the Leningrad Codex. There is a note So this is Psalm 82 here, Mizmor Le'osoph Elohim Nis'ov Baradat El, and it goes on. And the word that I was looking at was Valo Yovinu here. It has a circle above it, which ties to the Masorah Ketana, which says these two terms together occur 3 times in the Hebrew Bible. Well, if you want to know where those 3 times are, you can't really do that with a word search. You have to do that with a literal search. Okay, so next we're going to look at, actually at workspace 4 now. We're going to look at searching for more than one piece of information together, which I'm just going to call that a complex search. This is where our searching capabilities really become powerful and very helpful. So as most of you know, who I hope have already studied some biblical Hebrew, when you go through a first year biblical Hebrew grammar, you're going to learn about all the different stems and how the different spellings of the different verbs affect the way the vowels are going to manifest for each stem. So in this case, I'm doing a search where I'm looking for, I want verbs that are in the hifil stem, and I want either vav consecutive or imperfect, which are both the same form. But I only want to find verbs that are what we call sometimes a hollow verb, or otherwise known as an ayin vav verb, where the second, if we look at vayave here and we look at the lexical form in the instant details, the second root letter is a vav, and that vav tends to disappear. So the textbook tells you, hey, this is how this works, but you can find all of the instances of them instantly with a search like this, and you can sort of confirm that the rules they're telling you are accurate. And in the Vayiktol, when the accent recedes to the preceding vowel, the tsere, which would be there, shortens to a segol. So yeah, you can observe these rules that you learn in real time with the actual data in the manuscript. This is the same example, except that here we're looking at the perfect and imperative forms, where instead of having a chirek vowel, we have a tsere vowel for the perfect, and instead of having, what is an example of an imperative? Here, instead of having a patach vowel, we have a kametz vowel in this stem. Another example that I thought was interesting for this one, we're going to look at our analytics again, is you can, especially if you're learning the system of the stems, which are difficult to grasp for someone who's not a speaker of a Semitic language, you can look for, hey, I want to find all the instances of this lexeme, but only in the hifil, and then I want to find all the instances of this same lexeme, but only in the kal. And you can compare your results. And in this case, I'm going to add a little bit of information here. We're going to add the inflected form, and we're also going to add the gender of the verb. And so when it comes to the hifil, all of the occurrences are, except for the common occurrences, which are first person, all the occurrences of yalad in the hifil have a masculine subject. Or if it's the, in this case, where it says no gender, that's the infinitive construct, which doesn't have a gender. But if we compare that to all the instances of the verb yalad in the kal, let me add the inflected form and the gender again, we're going to find it's a little bit more mixed. And actually, maybe I should only show the gender. We have 156 instances where it's a feminine subject. So when it comes to this verb, its meaning in the kal tends to be really give birth to or deliver a child, birth a child. So normally that's a woman who does that. So the masculine forms are a little odd if you notice that pattern, that normally this is a mother is the subject of this verb, whereas for the hifil, it's always invariably, let's go back to this one. it's invariably masculine. Yeah. Okay, so that's a complex search you can combine. You can also combine and search for a lexeme with a search for a specific inflected form, or a search for a root with specific tags. All of those are possibilities. Anything that you can think of, really. But this is, remember, the @ symbol is saying this must match on a single item in the morphology, a single word or part of a word in the morphology. Oh, before we move on, I don't want to forget this. If you are searching for prepositions or the definite article, I do want to point out something that might be a little odd to you, but it's we were forced to do it this way. We separate the preposition with a definite article from the article only or the preposition only. So if you search for all instances of the article in the Hebrew Bible, let's close these analytics, we're going to get 24,000 hits, but none of them are going to have the preposition. So if you want to also search for the article when it occurs in the preposition, you have to search for compound. Let me see if that works, if I spelled that correctly. There we go. So now we have here in Genesis 1:5, lo or, to the light, God called it day. And vice versa, if you want to search for all the prepositions in the Hebrew Bible, you want to search for preposition and compound preposition together. Otherwise, like this instance here, you wouldn't find. Let me just search for a preposition. We're not going to find this instance in Genesis 1:5 where it was the preposition lamed with a definite article container. Okay, and last, and we'll be done quickly and I can take questions. You can search for multiple terms, for multiple words together. And so here it's the space that's delimiting, that's separating the forms in the text. And I don't know if any of these examples show. Yeah, I didn't do any examples that showed. Well, let's do one real quickly, just to try to cement this in your minds. If we go to Psalm 82, the form shofta here, it's an imperative with a paragogic hey is how it's tagged in WHM. If I just type out an unpointed inflected search for shin, pe, bet, hey, we're only going to find this instance where it's judge, feminine judge, a judgess. So what we have to do is we have to actually separate the hey, because it's a separately tagged form in those words, as in that word, as we saw. But now if we do this, we're actually going to find something maybe we didn't expect, which is that yes, we found the two instances of shofta that occur in the Hebrew Bible, but we also found instances of the verb shafat that are followed by a definite article. So we wouldn't have found those if we were doing an exact inflected search, or if we were just doing a simple letters search, where the whole word is matching visually according to how it's graphically or visually written in the Hebrew Bible. And if I added the vowels here, it would only find the last two instances, not the one in Judges, where it's a judge, a feminine participle, a judge. Okay, so here I just, this is just an example that came to mind. I've been trying to read through Joel 1:1, and the first words of Joel 1:1 are Devar Adonai Asher Hoyo Elyoel Ben Patuel. So I wanted to see how often do we have this combination of words, Davar followed by Adonai followed by Asher. And in this case, it didn't matter that I didn't search for exact lexical forms, that I didn't use the equal symbol. It still found only what I wanted. And it found some plural forms, which maybe that's not what I wanted, but if so, I could specify by adding the quote marks around davar. So now it's only going to find the singular. What are some other searches that I thought of. In this case, you know, if you're doing a word study on, or a sort of linguistic or grammatical study on how a word works in the Hebrew Bible, in this case, I thought of, you know, let's look at all the instances of the verb mem lamed aleph in the PL, so lemale, where it's followed by a definite direct object. And you can compare, you know, look at the data and come to some conclusion from it. Another one, I had heard recently a scholar say that Lechaot et Panei Adonai should actually was originally vocalized as Lirot et Panei Adonai, which is an interesting thesis. But the reason he can make that argument is because there's no hey here in the infinitive construct form of the verb ra'a. So if there's no hey, we don't have certainty that we should be vocalizing it as a call, I suppose is what he would say. Now my position is we should just follow the Masoretic text, and the history, if you know, if we're talking about the history, we're speculating a little bit, but he does have a point that this form, it is parsed as nifal, it is parsed as nifal infinitive construct according to the vowels, but if you removed the vowels, you might think, hey, perhaps this is just a simple call to see the face of the Lord your God rather than to appear like with the face of the Lord your God. And also, I want to note that depending on which interpretation you take, it would change which et this is, right? There are two ets in biblical Hebrew. There's the preposition with, and then there's the direct object marker. And maybe that's the last thing I should say before I take questions. Because I haven't mentioned it yet, if we just type out Aleph Tav, because we want to search for the definite direct object, as you all know, there's two different words, eight, in biblical Hebrew, and one is a preposition meaning with, and one is the definite direct object. So that's why it's useful to have the quick entry enabled, because the glosses help you disambiguate between different homonyms, and the homonym numbers are added after the word. If I just search for Aleph Tav, we're going to find many results, and they're not going to differentiate between the definite article and the preposition. So here in Genesis 4:1, in a sort of something that's a little bit strange in biblical Hebrew, Eve says, "Konithi ish et Adonai," I've acquired a man with the Lord. What does that mean exactly? We're not sure, but here it's parsed as with because that's our best guess at what this word, what this lexeme is. It's not parsed as the definite direct object, which would mean that if it were, she would be saying that she gave birth to, or she acquired the Lord, which wouldn't make sense. But yeah, notice that if I do an unpointed search for this lexeme, we're not differentiating between these two lexemes. Lexeme 1 is how it's the definite direct object marker in halot is listed, and then lexeme 2 is the preposition. So if you're doing, and if you type the equal symbol in front of it and you try to run a search without this search without providing the lexical form, the homonym number, Accordance is going to say, hey, this word exactly as you spelled it does not exist. Please select from one that exists. So now we'd have to choose. And maybe you want both, but in this case, let's choose only the preposition. So the homonym numbers, if you're searching for an exact lexical form, you need to remember the homonym numbers. One example I like to bring up is the verb ein reish bet, which in halot has 5 different entries because they identify 5 different meanings or etymologies to these words, which are, so they say these are all different words. Okay, that's it for different ways that you can search this module. It's very powerful. I know that sometimes it can be frustrating to be typing terms out into the search box because it's typing right to left, but then if you want to enter a tag, for example, then you're typing left to right. So just a few tips for writing out search terms on your own. If you want to type a tag, I recommend typing the opening and closing brackets first together. And you have to remember that because this is Hebrew, they're reversed. So I actually first typed the left on my computer, sorry, the right square bracket appears as the left square bracket on the screen, and the left square bracket appears as the right square bracket on the screen. Now that they're closed, if I type anything inside, the computer is not going to be confused as to what's inside. It's not going to try to display this as Hebrew as long as you have a closing, both an opening and a closing square bracket. Yeah, so I think I've covered everything I want to say. Let me take a look at the questions, if you've submitted any. Fabian asks if there's going to be an update to BHS-T as well. I can't promise that at this moment, but that is, I believe that is the next Hebrew Bible I'm going to work on. The reason I can't promise that is because, oh, well, let's talk about something else that I haven't talked about yet, the notes module. This is based on codes that are in the WHM data, and so for wherever these codes appear, we've sort of translated them into something that's visually readable. So in this case, it's saying that the word, for the word desha in Genesis 1:11, they read an accent. So in this case, it must be the Ravia, because that's the only accent on this word. They read an accent differently from BHS. And this is where, for these notes, this is where it's really useful to have the Leningrad Codex images, because you can look at this yourself. Whereas I believe BHS probably has a Zakef Katon here, has 2 dots instead of 1. And so the Q code says they agree with that the Grove Center agrees with BHQ, which BHQ has released a fascicle for Genesis against BHS in reading the Codex Leningrad. That's what this is saying. Whoops, I didn't mean to click on that. So the reason I can't really give a promise as to how long it'll take me to prepare the BHST to update it is just because BHST is going further from BHS in favor of the Leningrad Codex. So I'd have to do a little bit of work to make sure that every place that there's a note like one of these, that actually this module here on the right is going to follow the text of BHS rather than the Leningrad Codex, because that's how I understand the purpose of this module. It's got the superscripts that are in the printed BHS, so this must represent BHS exactly. But I do want to update it because it is a little bit out of date. This one is based off of WHM 4.14, so it's definitely out of date. Let me look at other questions. Good afternoon. Yeah, so someone asked, maybe I can talk about this a little bit more. Someone asked about the furtive patach real quick. Basically, when you're learning biblical Hebrew and you're learning the shape of syllables, how a syllable always begins with a consonant and may or may not end with a consonant, you learn that when at the end of the word you have a patach underneath a chet or a hey or an ayin, in those cases you have to pronounce the patach before the letter, the consonant, rather than after. So this is actually a diphthong. It's not supposed to be read varuha, it's supposed to be read varuah. And so I went, so the print BHS, I believe, does this offset, which is called the furtive patach, placing the patach a little bit to the right of the word to show that it's supposed to be pronounced before the consonant rather than after it. I believe BHS does this, BHQ does this, and other printed editions and Hebrew grammars do it, but not all. You might find a print Hebrew Bible that does not do this, and as well as you can see, our other Hebrew Bibles, for the moment, don't show furtive patach. So you just have to know the rule without having this visual reminder. Hopefully that answers the question. Someone wants to know the difference between HMTW4, ETCBC, and BHS tagged. So we actually have 4 different modules that we're talking about when we're comparing ETCBC and HMTW4 and BHS tagged. So BHS tagged and HMTW4, also known as Hebrew Bible tagged and Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia tagged, those are from the data provided by the Grove Center. If you look at the information for both modules, it says that it's built from the Westminster Hebrew Morphology. The modules that say ETCBC in their name, those come from the a linguistic database from the Free University of Amsterdam. I don't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but ET stands for Eptalstra. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Who I'm sure was instrumental in the development of this Bible. I do plan on working on these some point in the future, but I'm not making any promises. So the difference, so basically both of these are sort of paired modules. HMTW4 is just the text of the Leningrad Codex with with Ketib Kareh. All right, so let's go to a verse where there's a Ketib Kareh. In the BHST, there's no Ketib Kareh, because if you look at the printed BHS Bible, this is actually an error. I believe it shouldn't be vocalized. Anyways, if you look at the print BHS Bible, it tries to represent Ketib Kareh the way that it appears in the manuscript. In an electronic edition of the Hebrew Bible, that's a little bit more difficult because we don't have margins where we can place the Kareh. So instead, we have the Kareh appearing afterwards with the vowels that are intended to be there. And by the way, you can always distinguish the Ketib from the Kareh because the Kareh is going to have the cantillation mark, right? Because the Kareh is what you're singing out loud in the synagogue. That's the text that's meant to be understood. The Ketib is just, according to the Kareh, it's an error or needs to not be pronounced as it is for some other reason. The vocalization that is on the Ketibs, bear this in mind, is provided by the Grove Center. It's provided by the Westminster Hebrew Morphology. This is it's speculative. It's a theory, I guess. It's, you know, if we had to vocalize this word as it is with these consonants, this is how we might vocalize them. But this is not what's this is not what's in the Leningrad Codex, right? In the Leningrad Codex, let's open this up real quickly. Let's do it this way. What verse was I at? 8:7, I believe. Well, it'll be in the margin. Let's look between the columns here. Here, okay. Say it's spelled with the consonants hey, vav, tzadeh, aleph, but it's got the vowels for the consonants that are on the side, hey, yod, tzadeh, aleph. So it's a yod instead of a vav. Really, these are both the same form, and actually that's how they're parsed. If we go back, which window was I in? Space 5, I believe. If we go back here and you look at the parsing that WHM provides, they're the same parsing. This is Hifil imperative masculine singular. This is Hifil imperative masculine singular. So in this case, we're not really, the Ketib is not understood to be disagreeing with the Kareh. This is a little bit of a rabbit trail. HMTW4 has the Karehs, which you want if you want to know the full Masoretic text, whereas the BHST just has, yeah, in this case, these vowels are not in BHS. So if I had to re-prepare this module, I might remove the vowels in this case, perhaps, to make it more, yeah, I'm not sure what I would do, but you have the same pairing between these two ETCBC modules. The one that just says ETCBC has, if we go to that one, Tanakh, ETCBC, the one that does not say apparatus, is also going to show the Ketib and the Kareh, but in this case, they leave the Ketib unvocalized, which is sort of the intent of the Masoretic device that is Ketib Kareh. And then if we pull up the one with the apparatus, they also do provide the Kareh. Okay, but the difference with the apparatus has, if we scroll down somewhere, it has the superscripts that are in the printed BHS that refer to another module that you would need to own for all of this to work together, which is the BHS apparatus. So in Genesis 14:2, there's a note on the word Vashem Ever, and the note is that some Samaritan manuscripts have a dalet instead of a resh on this for this name. So that's the difference between HMTW4 and BHST. That's one pair, and then ETCBC and ETCBC with the apparatus is another pair. Yeah, there's a little bit more to that history, but I'm not gonna get into it. Let's go to more questions. Is the book available in accordance, or will it be? I'm not sure what that's referring to. I mentioned, oh no, it's probably referring to, not this one. It's probably referring to the Tiberian pronunciation of tradition of biblical Hebrew. The reason I'm not going to ever make this available is because you can download it for free. So also it's got some Babylonian vowel markings, which there's no way for us to represent that except by using images. So yeah, so this is downloadable for free. Read it, especially the first introductory chapter is really insightful and helpful to understand what is the Masoretic text. It doesn't really cover everything, doesn't talk about Masoretic data, the Masorot that are around the columns of the text in the manuscript, but it covers the history of the text itself. So it will not be available, but it's an excellent, you should get, it's for free online, just Google Tiberian pronunciation tradition of biblical Hebrew. Oh yeah, so the notes, yeah, I hope I mentioned, I covered this, the notes that come with this module. If you don't have them, as I explained at the beginning of the session, you should delete, okay. If you don't have this notes module, whoops, apparatus, HMTW4 notes. If you don't have this notes module, that's just called HMTW4 notes, you can get it by deleting HMTW4 from your library. Make sure you select move to trash, and then closing accordance, restarting accordance, and then opening easy install. And when you reinstall HMTW4, you should get the notes module with it. Yeah, so it's possible it's not on your computer, and that's the way to get it installed. We do not make use of Chris Kimball's UXLSC Leningrad text. That was a question that's available at tanakh.us. We may in the future. I'm not sure I see a reason to at this point. It's possible. I have to work through the current Hebrew Bibles that we have first, and then perhaps I might take a look at other free or editions that are out there online. Really, UXLC, it's trying to be a Unicode version of the Leningrad Codex online. And so that's basically what we have. It's not Unicode, but it is the Leningrad Codex. So, and if, by the way, if you find anywhere in this module where, hey, this dagesh shouldn't be there, it's not there in the codex, just send an email to the Grove Center, and in the next update, they'll conform the text to the Leningrad Codex, because that's their standard. Yeah, I'm aware. I've heard of the bug in the instant detail statistics, so that they match up with the analytics. I'm not in charge of fixing bugs in the software, but I can bring it up to Roy Brown. There's some other things that I want to improve in this module, the way that it works. Someone is asking, no, yeah, so the Tiberian pronunciation tradition of biblical Hebrew is not available in accordance, and it will not be because it's available for free online. So the HMTW4, if you buy that module, it does not come, if you buy that module by itself, it doesn't come with the BHS apparatus. No, it doesn't. You'd have to get BHST or the ETCBC module with apparatus in order to get the BHS apparatus in accordance. Oh, okay. Well, thanks to the last question. Someone said they learned a lot from the seminar. If there's any other questions, I'll give you a couple of minutes to write them in, and otherwise, I'll probably find a few other things to point out. Oh, another thing about the notes module, I'm reminded of. So there are places in the WHM database where there are these note codes like U right here, and U means BHS and BHQ have both been faithful to L, where there might be a question of the validity of the form, as you can see. So something is, whatever it is, what verse are we at? Let's scroll to that verse. Something is strange about the spelling of this form. I'm looking at it and I'm not sure what that would be. It's nifal. It looks normal to me, but maybe it's the omission of the dagesh on the yod. There's no dagesh. There normally should be in the Vayiktol spelling. There should be a dagesh on the first letter. So perhaps that's what this is referring to. So in other words, they're saying BHS and BHQ have correctly transcribed the Leningrad Codex here, and we agree with them. And that's a little bit of a way for the Grove Center to say, to also quickly sort of answer, point out to people who want to say, hey, this is an error, there should be a dagesh here. Well, it's not about whether the Leningrad Codex is correct, it's about whether this module matches the Leningrad Codex. And in this case, you might say that this is an error in the Leningrad Codex, I'm not sure whether you should say that, but yeah, normally there should be a dagesh here. The other thing I wanted to point out is that there's also, besides these note codes, there's also every instance in the WHM notes where a tag called unexpected is found. I've included them in this notes module. So you can search for them if you open the notes module by itself. You can search just in the English, yeah, just the English content. Unexpected. Let's go down to, scroll. Okay, here we are, where there are instances of unexpected. Yeah, a lot of these are just instances where you have the second person masculine singular form that's in pause, so it looks like a feminine second person singular form, but it's not. So that's why it's saying unexpected here. Those are not as interesting, but this one might be in Genesis 3:22. The form ka'ahad is tagged as absolute, and it's saying unexpected here because it looks like a construct form. So what's unexpected is that really it's because it's followed by a preposition, this must be tagged as absolute, but it kind of looks like it's a construct form. So that's these are interesting, and the other one is uncertain. Let's scroll down to get to first real instance here. Lamas, yeah, in Genesis 49:15. What's going on there? Lamas ovev. So, and it became returned into forced labor of someone who works, of a slave. I'm not sure, but anyways, the uncertain here is indicating that construct, the tag construct here on this form is uncertain. Yeah. Let's see other hits. Yeah, this one. This one's interesting too. The parsing absolute is uncertain. It should really be absolute, it has the definite article in front of it, but the syntax is a little strange. Hine Aaron haparit adon kol haaretz. What is this saying? Behold the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth? Or is it the ark of the covenant is the Lord of all the earth? Which would be strange. So the parsing is uncertain here. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions, and then if there aren't, okay, there aren't, so we're going to be done for today. I'm gonna end the recording.